It should be, in his words, an absolutely breathtaking home shrine, used solely for meditation and worship of Shiva Lingam, Nataraja, Murugan, Ganesha, and the Satguru's Tiruvadi. This is the home's most beautiful room. He began emphasizing the daily performance of puja in each and every home, in addition to meditation, which for decades had been the mainstay of his prescription for spiritual living. For those in the West as well as the East, he had his monks put into writing the traditional home puja, which he had arranged for them to learn in the late 1970s. He published it as the Shaiva Atmartha Puja, likely the first time it was ever made widely available, presenting the ancient Sanskrit chants and providing English and Tamil translation and transliteration. Thoroughgoing in everything he did, Guru Deva drew deep from the well of Shaivite liturgy to bring the ancient priestly magic into his own sanctuaries in 1982, asking Subramania Guru Kal to do something unheard of, convey the arts of temple puja, Shaiva Parartha Puja, to his monks, which he did. In Alavedi at the Sri Subramania Ashram. In 1985, Guru Deva had that knowledge bolstered by B. Shanmugam Shivacharyar, who flew to Kauai from South India to teach the monks the Homa rites and patiently wrote out by hand the Parartha Puja in Devanagari and transliterated English. This was done with the blessings of Sambamurti Shivacharyar, head of the then India Archaka Sangam. During the 1981 India Odyssey, while talking with an elite group of Tamil elders in Tiruchendur, Guru Deva said, "If you give up your temples and your religion, you will within 50 years lose your race." On that same inner search, Mr. A. Gunanayagam, president of the Ilathu Thiruneri Tamil Mandram, gave a talk on behalf of the Mandram at the Saraswati Hall in Colombo, enumerating the activities and accomplishments of Shaiva Siddhanta Church and lauding its service to Shaivism. When the apostles of different faiths left the Western world in the 15th to the 19th centuries for the shores of the East, they believed they were following the true course of the river of spirituality, which to their mind was flowing from the West to the East. They genuinely felt they were carrying the torch of spiritual enlightenment to those that needed it. But the emergence of Swami Vivekananda set them thinking. Was not the flow of the river really from the east to the west? Now has come a third age, with the blossoming of the Shaiva Siddhanta Church of Hawaii. Is it not a near miracle being enacted before our very eyes? Has the river started to flow backwards? What we mean is, the once spiritually glorious East has dried up into insignificance except for a few oases here and there. The East has become insensitive to changing times and has failed to keep pace with the technological age. Lethargy and indifference has overpowered the rightful heirs of a golden heritage. It was therefore fallen to the lot of the Shaiva Siddhanta Church to stand up for the greatest religion on earth, both by precept and example. It is carrying aloft the torch of Shaivism. An earnest seeker cannot but sit at the feet of the Church to regain something of the glorious Shaiva past. Such is the silent revolution that is being enacted in Hawaii. Otherwise, how can a 16-ton granite Nandi from Mahabalipuram be installed in the holy precincts of the Shaiva Siddhanta Church in Hawaii? How can the 6-foot Lord Nataraja take abode in the Kadavul Temple of Hawaii? It is not only the ritual and ceremony concerning these that alone are fascinating, it is the underlying philosophy which the Church so assiduously puts across which is most inspiring. We lift our hands in homage and gratitude to you, Guru Deva, as the God-sent dynamic ambassador of Shaivism, to the dedicated and selfless band of Swamis, and to the Shaiva Siddhanta Church, with a prayer in our heart that the great and good work of the Church may continue to edify and enlighten all mankind. Defending the word church. Back in 1975, Guru Deva had officially changed the name of his organization to Shaiva Siddhanta Church, having recognized through his years of study the strategic value of that legal form of religious institution in the United States. It was not a popular choice for some. Objections came from many sides, especially and understandably from Hindus in Asia, who did not like the association with the Catholic and Anglican churches, which they saw as the nemesis of Hinduism. but Gurudeva held his ground and spent decades defending his decision. Ultimately, he would be proved right, but it was not an easy campaign. Members left him on this issue, but then members also left him because they refused to stop smoking, or refused to have their wives stay home and raise the children, or refused any number of the requirements he placed on dedication. In Shaivadharma Shastras, the book of discipline of Shaivasiddhanta Church, composed in the early 90s, Gurudeva explains, "The name of our Hindu church is Shaivasiddhanta Church, meaning sacred congregation of Supreme God Shiva's revealed truth. These two Sanskrit words and one English word we consider to be our international trademark. No other term should be substituted for the word church when writing or conversing in English. The word church may be translated into other languages for purposes of conversation. It may also be so translated for legal documents, such as for registration of mission groups, as deemed preferable by the parent church. Such translations shall always use the official terms approved by the Church. In such translations, based on the pattern of well-established local churches, we choose words that most strongly convey this meaning. A one-minded, hierarchical body of devotees, following a single doctrine of belief, with strict codes of conduct, an initiated priesthood, ministry and missionaries, well-defined sacraments, shared scriptural authority, and exclusivity of membership free of other alliances." We know that the term church will in some communities carry great respect and power, and in other communities it may be demeaned and belittled. Knowing theirs is the world's first Hindu church on the planet, our members use the name Shaivasiddhanta Church, or its equivalent as traditionally rendered in the world's many languages, boldly in all instances defending its use when needed. Finally, it must be emphasized that while we adhere strongly to the institutional structure of church, we do so to most effectively convey the pure traditional Sanatana Dharma as expressed in the Vedas. As one of the world's most orthodox congregations, our use of this institutional structure should never be misconstrued as carrying or even implying any Christian or Western religious content. While the Greek-based word church is most commonly understood as a place of worship, the full meaning encompasses the religious congregation and organization on many levels of activity. Church takes on special importance in legal and governmental discussions, where matters of church and state are frequently focused on. In more and more nations, in federal and state governments, religion is defined as church, and the separation of church and state is respected and constitutionally enforced. Such protections, grounded in the concept of church, are crucial to the rights of all religious groups. These include protection from government and from other religions which may seek to dominate faiths with less political power. Gurudeva was clear on cardinal guidelines in administering his institution. First, the Satguru and his monastics would be completely in charge. There would be no family involvement of any sort in the running of the church. Second, no relatives of the guru or the monks would have any special access, privilege, or participation in the administration. Third, the church would not support itself through running businesses, but rather be supported by donations. Fourth, his monasteries would be strict cloisters for men only. Publishing goes digital. Late one afternoon in 1985, Gurudeva entered a little computer store in the historic town of Kauai. After playing with the state-of-the-art Macintosh for a while, he bought one for himself. Computers had never much interested him, but this one seemed different, friendly, approachable. For a week he experimented with it, calling the monks into his office every time he discovered a new feature. The guru and his shishyas learned the computer together, side by side. Seeing its potential, he ordered one for each of his monks, instructing them to adapt their various services to this new tool. And did they? From that day forward, the monks saw that their Satguru always had the newest, fastest, sleekest Macintosh on his desk. And from the release of Apple's first PowerBook, fellow airline passengers would gaze covetously at the holy man's cool laptop. Going headlong into the world of computers to do the work of Dharma proved a strategic move of prodigious proportions. In order to fully embrace the new technology, Gurudeva decided that his order of monks would need to sell the 2,500 colonies of bees. Since the small publications team, which was doing both, had limited manpower, the monks had managed the bees island-wide for 10 years on Kauai as an agricultural endowment. much like the farming enterprise Yogaswami had started in Batticaloa, Sri Lanka, for his young men followers. One of Gurudeva's most strategic and looked forward to duties was writing his publisher's desk column for Hinduism Today, which for many years was monthly. Frequently he addressed matters that were brought to his attention through his personal ministry with devotees, students, and members around the world. In 1983, he came upon a way to solve the problem that Hindus throughout the diaspora were having with Christmas. Hindu kids were upset and their parents were in a quandary, and no one in the Hindu world was providing a viable answer to the annual torture. In one publisher's desk, Gurudeva announced the inauguration of a modern Hindu holiday to be called Pancha Ganapati. It was 5 days of worship, sharing, and gift-giving, celebrated from December 21st to 25th, focusing on Lord Ganesha's 5 Shaktis, which bring harmony in the home, among friends, in the workplace, in the community, and the boon of religiousness and refined culture that this harmony brings. Now when children ask mom and dad, why don't we get presents during Christmas, they could answer, we do, and not just one day, but on 5 days, Gurudeva wrote. Daddy, why don't we have Christmas? That question was heard in so many Hindu homes we visited that, in cooperation with scholars and elders, an alternative for Christmas was conceived. It's interesting that in 1966, the Afro-American community created Kwanzaa, a social black identity earth-based festival celebrated each year from December 26 to January 1st. Our own Pancha Ganapati is a festival to the 5-faced elephant god. It is 5 days of gift-giving and festivities within the home, especially for the children. There is no need for a tree. Eco-advocates appreciate this, nor wreaths, nor a Santa. Lord Ganesha does it all, in 5 days of merriment and mirth. Those who have taken up this home festival from December 21st through the 25th have enjoyed it year after year. It can include offerings, picnics, feasts, exchange of cards and gifts with relatives, friends, and business associates. Each day a tray of sweets, fruits, and incense is offered to Pancha Ganapati, often prepared and presented by the children. Chants, songs, and bhajans are sung in his praise. After puja, sweets are shared as prasadam. Each day gifts are given to the children, who place them before Pancha Ganapati to open only on the 5th day. Greeting cards are exchanged, always offering Hindu wisdom or a verse from scripture. As Hinduism Today became his central outreach effort, Gurudeva focused his editorials on issues that were generally shrouded in silence, using his journal to guide the modern Hindu mind in how to dharmically approach matters like spousal abuse, suicide, adultery, pornography, mixed marriages, organ transplants, and human cloning. The latter led to an invitation from President Bill Clinton's Blue Ribbon Committee on Human Cloning for Gurudeva to define the Hindu view for legislators confronting the issue. Years later, the Texas Medical Association asked the magazine to write a chapter in their book on medical ethics to guide U.S. doctors in their care of Hindu patients. Gurudeva took special delight when the editor of Christianity Today approached the editors of his journal to develop an article that would inform Christians about Hinduism. It was something of a dream he never had, Christianity Today working with Hinduism Today to better understand their respective faiths. He guided the development of the article in every detail. In fact, that was his way with almost every article, which he kept close to through detailed and frequent discussions with his monks. In late 1996, Gurudeva transformed Hinduism Today from its original newspaper format into a magazine, a quantum leap that extended its global reach and impact in Hindu communities. In 1999, he described his vision for his unique journal. Who could ever conceive of a journal founded to help everyone, to support every sect? For a long time it was a mystery to everyone, until the realization came that this was our public service. Most monasteries or mathas have established feeding centers for the poor, orphanages, schools, and hospitals as their way of paying back for the privilege of being allowed to live aloof and apart from the world. Ours is Hinduism Today, a much-needed service as we march boldly into the 21st century. Chapter 28, Timeless Legacy. In the spring of 1987, Gurudeva's vision for Yerevan Temple was evolving from a mystical revelation to a real-world plan. Working with sacred architects in South India, he was defining its physical form, establishing the principles of its creation, and considering the style of the massive stone edifices built during South India's Chola dynasty a millennium ago. The big question was still pending. What form of Shiva would inhabit the inner sanctum? It was a meditation that continued for months, for he knew the relevance of this decision. It would define the temple more than any external style. It would be its life and essence, the most holy and powerful force around which all else would circle. A clear crystal vision. One day, in an early morning vision in his private quarters, Gurudeva saw the future, as he would later say. In fact, he often said, if you want to know what you should do, do this. In your mind, travel into the future, and from there look back and witness what happened. The present-day decision will be obvious. In this vision of the yet-to-be, Gurudeva saw a massive crystal Shiva lingam shining brightly in the sanctum of Yerevan Temple, radiating out to the world. It was a titan among crystals. In fact, it seemed in this first seeing impossibly large, fantastical, and beyond reality. Perhaps, he thought, it is merely the spiritual form of the Shiva lingam and not the physical one. Downstairs, a few hours later, he shared this vision with the monks, letting them know he had his answer as to which form of Shiva that Yerevan Temple would embody. It would be a crystal lingam, known in Sanskrit as Spatika Shiva lingam. In the ancient text, it is said that a lingam which is the aniconic form of the creator, preserver, destroyer of the universe is the highest of worshipful icons. It represents that which is beyond representation, beyond form, and even imagination. It is the all-in-all, the self beyond time, form, space, and cause. The Agamas say one can worship the great god Shiva in the form of a lingam made of mud or sand, of cow dung or wood, of bronze or black granite stone, but the purest and most sought-after form is the quartz crystal, a natural stone not carved by man but made by nature, gathered molecule by molecule over hundreds, thousands, or millions of years, grown as a living body grows, but infinitely more slowly. Such a creation of nature is itself a miracle worthy of worship. The monks were delighted to hear of their guru's revelation and imagined the meanings behind it. Kadavul Temple already housed god Shiva as Nataraja, the divine dancer who creates and inhabits every atom of the cosmos, and Yerevan Temple would host Shiva as the transcendent beyond, immanent and transcendent form and formless. It was perfect, but the monks were not at all prepared for what would happen next. Gurudeva paid a visit the next day to the crystal journey shop at Kilahana on Kauai. He was there looking at the wares, asking the proprietor about crystals, looking for a large one he had visualized. She did not have such a crystal, but eagerly shared her own similar vision of a giant crystal. Some weeks later, she called requesting to meet with Gurudeva, arriving at the monastery mid-morning. She was a kind of mythical character, a child of the 70s. A cherubic, intelligent lady, about 40 years old, in her long dress, looking a bit Roma, her round cheeks pink with the pleasure of her visit. She shared that she had an important message for him. She was taken to Gurudeva's office, where he listened to her tale. Gurudeva, I had a dream last night. In my dream I saw even more clearly than before a giant crystal, very tall and perfectly formed, just like the one you described. Not only that, I saw where it is. If you will allow me, I want to go there. I want to find the crystal and bring it to you. Will you buy me a ticket? Never in his life had Gurudeva bought a ticket for a near stranger on a dream-induced mission. But this was different. Gurudeva then told the visitor of his own dream that same morning, of how he had seen the giant crystal too, but never imagined someone else might have the same dream at nearly the same time. He took it as a sign and did the unthinkable, bought her a round-trip ticket to Arkansas, the natural state. Soon she was on a crystal quest. Having never visited Arkansas, she took the logical geological course and began visiting the various mines in the area. Along with Brazil, Arkansas is the world's most productive crystal source, and there were dozens of mines to be tracked down at the end of long, unpaved roads. Ultimately, she found the crystal at the mines of one James Coleman, a hard-scrabble man dressed in denim with a scrappy beard and calloused hands, whose father and grandfather had mined crystals and who knew the business like none other. Ambling to his jeep, the taciturn miner motioned to her to get in. Off the two drove, about a mile on a pitted coral path some called a road that ended at an old wooden warehouse. Getting down, Coleman walked through the double doors and headed to the back of the open space, stopping at a pallet in a dark corner. On it was a musty mattress, worn and worthless, rolled in a circle and tied with a hemp rope. Without so much as a word, Coleman cut the rope with a pocket knife and threw open the mattress. There lay the large, milky white quartz crystal. It was a marvel to behold, a perfect thing that could be an artifact in a museum of art or a masterpiece in the foyer of a billionaire's mansion. But it was here, not far from nowhere. His customary reticence overcome by the urgent need to relate this story, Coleman turned to the woman, who stood speechless, with happy tears washing down her cheeks. In 1975, my brother and I were digging for crystals. Below these hills there are honeycombs of caves where our rocks are harvested. We were 65 feet under that day when we found our way into a new cave. Nothing unusual about it at first. It was some 20 feet across and 5 feet high, all dark and dank. But then our light fell on this crystal. It had fallen and lay on its side, broken away from the cave floor. Around it on 3 sides was a colony of smaller crystals, 10 or so, which were all still intact and growing. This one had stopped growing, of course, as you can see. It has 6 sides and is perfectly pointed, and its surface feels like cool ice day and night. We went up to get the mattress and wrapped the crystal in it, dragging it inch by inch to the surface. It took all day. It was to both of us an amazing discovery. Though our family has been mining crystals for 3 generations, no one ever heard of such a gem. My brother and I knew it was one of a kind, and we both sensed it had a destiny, though we didn't know what that might be. Something extraordinary. We kept it in the mattress and brought it here, out of sight, vowing not to tell a soul about it. But somehow you saw it. How else would you know? We figured that one day we would learn what the crystal was meant for. I think it was meant to go with you to Hawaii and to be with that holy man who saw it. The crystal has been waiting, and I'm glad you came to get it. The crystal seeker was exultant. She called Guru Deva, who asked for photos to be sent. When he saw them, he said, "Yes, that's it." She arranged for the purchase and packing of the crystal, then flew home. The 700-pound, 39-inch tall Sphatika Shiva Lingam arrived at the monastery on August 14th and was formally installed in front of Lord Kadavul Nataraja 2 days later, awaiting the day Iravan temple would be completed. Gurudeva's morning vision had manifested in a magical way. One afternoon, years later, a deva with whom Gurudeva often communicated signaled that he was present and asked if there were any questions. The monk with him asked about the significance of the huge crystal. With the same ease that ordinary people listen to a friend speak, Gurudeva clairaudiently heard the inner plane deva's answer and dictated it in 2- and 3-word volleys to his amanuensis of the day. Now, the large crystal we have is very special, having been especially prepared for its mission as a relay station for peace on earth, harmony, contentment, healing and patience, freedom and goodwill, and close cooperation among the life forms and human beings on this planet. It is at this very moment relaying trillions of messages through every crystal on this planet, energizing and educating even the smallest insect, fighting for peace and human survival. Gurudeva's global renown grew steadily. In 1986, the World Religious Parliament in New Delhi named him one of 5 modern-day Jagatacharyas, world teachers, for his international efforts in promoting a Hindu renaissance. That award and other messages made it clear to Gurudeva that he was being embraced by the East. In fact, he was being anointed as the first Western person ever to be regarded as a Satguru, that highest of spiritual offices, heretofore reserved reserved, even guarded, for men of Indian origin. It was an honor, but more importantly, it was a responsibility, one that he never took for granted. It was also a double-edged sword, for there was a conservative coterie of Indians who could never accept the idea of a non-Indian rising to prominence as a guru whose feet they were obliged to touch. They kept their distance, holding a critical watch. Gurudeva only occasionally attended conferences, though he was often invited. He found a handful deeply significant. The Global Forums of Spiritual and Parliamentary Leaders on Human Survival in Oxford 1988, Moscow 1990, and Rio de Janeiro 1992, the Parliament of the World's Religions in Chicago 1993, and the Millennium World Peace Summit of Religious and Spiritual Leaders held at the United Nations 2000. If man finds the fear of his own death difficult to confront, consider the possibility that the human race itself is in mortal danger and could perish forever. That was precisely the enterprise for which approximately 140 of the most influential men and women from 60 nations gathered at Oxford University in England from April 11th to 15th, 1988. Astrophysicist Dr. Carl Sagan, biologist Dr. James Lovelock, Soviet nuclear scientist Dr. Yevgeny Velikov, and other preeminent experts in population, media, and education presented a litany of ominous threats. Humankind had awakened to the terrible revelation that the Earth and its tiny cargo of living things are vulnerable, that unless something is done soon, one day man himself, like tens of thousands of species disappearing each year, may become extinct. Not since the Middle Ages had legislators and spiritual leaders met at such a level, and then it was limited to European statesmen and Christian leaders. The 1988 Global Forum brought together representatives of 5 major faiths: Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, as well as African and American Indian religions, Jainism, Sikhism, and Shintoism. What are the problems that endanger us? In no particular order: war, hunger, poverty, and inequity of resources, debt, drugs, desertification, illiteracy, population growth, religious fundamentalism, global warming, disintegration of ecology, loss of species, and social injustice. As the 5 days unfolded, it was evident that delegates shared the urgency voiced by Austrian Cardinal Koenig. We have come together to find ways out of crisis. There is only one choice: to survive or perish together. To this, Robert Runcie, Archbishop of Canterbury, added, "There are 2 qualities for survival: reverence and cooperation. We need to control our spiritual hubris. We need to cease believing this is a cheap, throwaway universe in which everything but human life is expendable." Africans stress the vast schism that exists between rich and poor nations, decrying excess materialism and unbridled consumption. The Dalai Lama's presence caused the biggest stir, partly because his unadorned talk of love and compassion cut to the core of the human dilemma, pointing to the heart as the place to transform both self and world. His message of mutual respect and understanding, of resisting the urge to propagate one's faith and to replace it with a desire to contribute usefully to humanity as a whole, were messages needed to be heard. For this, the exiled Buddhist God King was the perfect spokesman. Gurudeva created quite a scene when one of the religious leaders was slighted at a plenary session opening blessing. After an eloquent African priestess concluded the prayer, the panel moderator said, "Now let's get on to the real business of the day." Gurudeva boldly stood among them and took exception to this remark, telling the organizers that they had invited the spiritual leaders to work with the political leaders, but instead had them come up and give some little prayer, then insulted their presence and diminished their participation. "This priestess is the real business of the day," he scolded them, his long arm held aloft. "As much as everything else, you've really offended every spiritual tradition by pronouncing that we're just here as wallpaper to your meeting. That's not why we came here." The chairperson apologized, first from the podium and the next morning in person. She and others realized he was right, night, and they had met to change their habits. It was a crucial moment in the conference, and the rest of the week spiritual leaders were eagerly brought forward and properly honored. In 1990, Gurudeva again joined the world's religious and political leaders, this time for a 7-day sojourn where ice and snow were the prime physical reality and the sun was never seen. Imagine a room roughly the size of an airplane hangar filled with 1,400 beautiful and colorfully costumed souls from every corner of the globe, all discovering their shared cosmology, all remembering that this fragile earth is our only home, all learning how we have foolishly polluted our only sanctuary, and all determined to protect it. Imagine that, and you will have a good idea of what the Global Forum experience in Moscow was all about. We were invited to the Global Forum of Parliamentary and Religious Leaders in Oxford, in Rio de Janeiro, and also in Moscow. All of our invitations were handled in this way. If you want us, we're ticketless travelers. We are renunciate monks and don't have a travel budget. Send tickets and we'll be there. It seems they wanted us there so badly for some reason that tickets arrived. The tickets either have to be first class or business class because I don't fit into those little seats anymore. They're getting smaller and smaller and smaller every year. The strong delegations of indigenous peoples there, from Africa, North America, Hawaii, and elsewhere, reminded Gurudeva of how valuable these traditions are and how much they are still ignored and abused. They are like fragile cultural gene pools, seeds of an earlier wisdom that mankind once amassed, then squandered, and now needs to sow again. One elder rightly suggested that we are all Earth's indigenous people. It was clear to Gurudeva that Hindus are the natural allies of these traditions, and that we should, without imposing, offer them resources that they might find useful and speak up on their behalf. The Global Forum in Moscow, funded by the Russian government, was also about learning that man has become the major predator on the earth. So much so that he is preying on himself in an unnatural cannibalism. Unless the present course is altered, scientists urge, we may be responsible for a kind of unintentional suicide. What Gurudeva heard in Moscow could be summarized. If we don't change our attitudes, if we persist in our present habits and practices, we will not thrive. We may not even survive. It can be said even more simply, change or perish. The earth will heal once we stop hurting it. Wars, pollution, species extinction, and fundamentalism will cease when they are no longer acceptable to human conscience, and they will no longer be acceptable the minute we understand their terrible results. Gurudeva loved his days in Moscow, even the awkward evenings when he and the Swami with him were asked to join, in their simple, unsewn monastic garb, a concert and cocktail party in the dazzling 150-year-old Kremlin reception hall, and hobnob with the leaders of the world. On one evening toward the end, the Russian government held a grand ball in the Kremlin, inviting business and cultural leaders to join the men and women who had come from other lands to face the future of humanity. Interestingly, as each of the earlier days had unfolded, religious leaders had vied to give the opening blessing, fighting sometimes furiously to be chosen. All but the Hindus, who stood aside, witnessing this jockeying for pride of place. After 5 or 6 days, all of the major religions had had their turn except the Hindus. So a Hindu leader was selected for this night, which turned out to be the most important of them all. It was to be Swami Paramananda Bharati, a Sringeri monk who had been a physicist before renouncing the world. Swami approached Gurudeva during lunch. Concerned that his message might not be fully understood by this diverse group, Gurudeva gave him courage to speak out boldly to the world, assuring him that the message would be clear to all present. That evening, dressed as Adi Shankara himself had dressed, danda in hand, 3 stripes of vibhuti on his arms and forehead, a picture of purity and simplicity in that formal room, Swami removed his slippers, strode to the podium under the gaze of 300 TV cameras from all over the world, and began his invocation. We are in an age of disillusionment, confusion, and panic. We do not know from what point to commence our journey to enlightenment, in what direction, and at what speed. Fortunately, there exists one course of knowledge which determines all of these parameters. That is the immortal Veda. Here I give 2 hymns from the Veda. These are prayers to the gods pervading the various celestial bodies like the sun, the moon, the stars, nay, all the 5 elements of the environment. Herein we pray for Shanti, that is, for peace in the kingdom of the animals, like cows, peace in the kingdom of the humans. Let this Shanti, this peace, descending by the grace of God, reverberate in the depths of our hearts to give each one of us everlasting bliss. Let it augur peace and prosperity to the leaders and to the people of this great nation, our host country, to the rest of the world, and to the global forum. Swami then chanted, his sweet Sanskrit filling the Kremlin hall. He closed by asking all present to join him in saying aloud Om, the all-encompassing sound 3 times. Swami chanted Om and lifted both hands to invite all to join. A deep, resonant Om filled the chamber. A second time, and then a third, the Swami chanted, and the audience responded, each time more forcefully. It was a powerful moment, as though the whole world was chanting together, sharing a language that all understood, that transcended their differences and arose from their underlying oneness. Gurudeva later said that mystically the Om in the Kremlin was the force that let loose the remarkable changes in the USSR that, unbeknownst to all present, were soon to follow. He told of the experience in Hinduism today. Who could believe it? Over 2,000 spiritual and political leaders and guests seated in Lenin's Kremlin, Khrushchev's Kremlin, and now Gorbachev's Kremlin, all hearing a Shanti chant from the Vedas, and all chanting Om aloud together, led by a Swami from India. That Om was a war-shattering cry for peace, but sadly it was ignored in the U.S. press, except for a trivial reference in Time magazine. So many important and high-minded people were there, including Gorbachev and Shevardnadze, including the world's most influential rabbis and imams, priests and swamis, monks and theologians, not to mention politicians from the parliaments of 57 nations, scientists and environmentalists, artists and media pundits. It was perhaps the first global council for the human race, all working for peace, all chanting the sacred Om mantra of universal oneness, in a single melodious voice. Having the opportunity to meet many young Soviets in their early 30s and even in their teens, we observed a surprisingly mature interest in yoga, meditation, the occult, mysticism, Christology, and clairvoyance. Many people don't know that Soviet scientists and Hindu yoga adepts have been collaborating for the past 2 decades in mental telepathy and other extraterrestrial sciences to increase the communication faculties of the human migration into space, and for less noble purposes too. Despite the -10 degrees Fahrenheit winter for which our hand-woven cotton robes were not designed, my personal experience in Moscow was warm, vibrant, and full. I enjoyed attending Russia's first public Christmas celebration in 70 years. I also enjoyed speaking with the spiritual old friends we had made at the Oxford Global Forum in April of 1988. The spirit was one of hopeful eagerness. As a species, we have essentially proven ourselves fully capable of seeking pleasure, of lack of concern for others, and a general disregard for the concerns of the day until the reality of some emergency is upon us. The 2 global forums laid out the entire emergency that humankind is facing on this planet, factually and without exaggeration. It is a sad list of problems, but the spirit in man is more powerful than any challenge it ever faces, and I found hope in seeing these eminent world leaders tear themselves away from pressing responsibilities to fly to Moscow in the middle of winter and spend 7 days living together, eating together, talking together, liking and learning to love and trust each other, listening together, questioning, sharing knowledge. Both the seriousness of our plight and the sincerity of people to cooperate in resolving things emerged. Because these are the leaders of humankind, their voices will be heard back home. Every member of their parliaments or their congregations will know and understand the message, and the scientists who were present will share it with all their colleagues. The truth, without exaggeration, finally came out, and the solution was clear. They say when a problem is adequately explained and understood, the solution is self-evident. The solution is simple, and it rests on the shoulders of each human. Think globally, act locally to restructure one's own home, one's own values, one's relationship to nature for a purified, sustainable environment. We took our own message to Moscow, of course. It was a plea for the world to rediscover the ethic of nonviolence, called ahimsa in Sanskrit. We need to be very practical and not just philosophical about this. World peace begins in the home. Families must learn to be peaceful, to settle all arguments and contention before they sleep at night, even if they stay up for 3 days, so the children can see that peace can be attained and then maintained through the use of intelligence. It is up to the parents to create the peacemakers of the future. If we teach children in only one way, by our own example, parents must teach children to appreciate those who are different, those who believe differently, teach them the value of human diversity, give them the tools to live in a world of differences without feeling threatened, without forcing their ways or their will on others. This is the way of Dharma. I also spoke about how we should bring the Mother Spirit forward and seek out the guidance and intuitive knowledge of our women. If the Hawaiian mothers, the African mothers, and all the mothers of the planet come forward, then we can realize a global peace. We are too deep into the Kali Yuga for men to make a difference. They tried. The mothers, daughters, sisters, and wives who have a great ability to heal, to harmonize and influence will bring us into the golden age. Give them more power in the struggle for peace. Nonviolence should be redefined to include not only killing but also causing injury physically, mentally, or emotionally, even in the most subtle ways. We can injure ourselves, we can injure our environment, we can injure nature's other creatures and thus be a source of pain and sorrow, or we can live a harmless life and be a source of healing and joy. The sages and illumined ones knew all about karma. They full well knew that what we have done to others will be done to us, if not in this life, then in another. They knew that violence which one commits will return to him by a cosmic process that is unerring. There was a strong influence of Eastern thought and perception in Moscow. While a few Semitic leaders spoke about man's relationship to the natural order as one of dominion, the Buddhists, Jains, Sikhs and Hindus came forward and spoke of the wonderful oneness that makes up life. They explained that a sense of domination offends the oneness and perpetuates wrongful and harmful action. From the Eastern viewpoint, everything exists within a divine law and order. No creature has more right to life than another. They said it is for us humans to adjust to being a part of the greater whole which sustains life, which is intricately interwoven and interdependent. On the final day, Gurudeva was dining in one of the dozens of restaurants in the Rosia Hotel. The staff all knew this was the forum's last day, so everyone was flying home. The waitress glanced again and again at Gurudeva's warm gray boots, which he had brought in anticipation of the frigid winter. When offering the check, she boldly shared that her family was suffering. In broken English, she softly asked if she could have the boots for her husband. Gurudeva, seeing her noble desperation, removed them, and asked the monk traveling with him to remove his, handing 2 pairs of boots to a thankful waitress and walking back to his room in his socks. While he found value in these major conferences, Gurudeva also found the meetings inefficient, boring, repetitive, and woefully lacking in follow-through. He complained about meeting the same people time and again, making the same well-meaning resolutions, then forgetting all about it. After the 1993 Chicago Parliament of the World's Religions, he tried to keep the group of 25 presidents of religion going, of which he was one of 3 Hindus. He felt this group could occasionally make strategic statements on important issues, but there was little interest beyond his own efforts, and nothing came of it. It made him wary of future involvements of this kind. Dr. Kusumita Peterson, a devotee of Sri Chinmoy in the staff of the Global Forum, Parliament and Millennium Summit at the UN, commended Gurudeva's participation at these international conferences for his powerful spiritual presence and his great clarity and commitment in engaging the issues. Also, his behind-the-scenes contribution has made a little-known but historic difference to the development of interfaith work in the last generation. When the Third Global Forum for Human Survival was announced, a wealthy Hindu, realizing his faith yet had no substantial representatives, sponsored Gurudeva's 1992 trip to Rio de Janeiro. This was a smaller event, about 75 religious leaders in a dialogue with 300 parliamentarians. Apart from the usual things you would expect from such a gathering, something quite unusual, maybe even extraordinary, took place there. Gurudeva was not really prepared for it, nor was it on anyone's agenda, but it happened. From the opening address by a U.S. senator to the closing remarks by religious leaders 3 days later, virtually everyone acknowledged the sacredness of existence. It was not just the Hindus, Jains, and Sikhs who were saying these things. It was everyone. Politicians propounded it, business people professed it, priests preached it, musical poets praised it. It ran like a golden thread through every speech, through every call for a change in human behavior. Gurudeva was amazed and thrilled by this common mantra. Such a thing had not happened at previous global forums. In Rio it was being said loud and clear, nature is sacred, life is sacred. It is a desecration to destroy this precious and holy creation. It is a sacrilege which, if continued, will surely end in our own death as a species. Senator Al Gore, who approached Gurudeva and shook his hand, spoke of the wrongful assumption that we are somehow separate from nature. Brazilian Archbishop Câmara made this rather stunning statement: "We are inside God. How can I hate if I am part of God?" This is incredible but true. If God is everywhere, it means we are inside God, and we have God inside ourselves. India's Bishop Gregorius spoke of immanence and transcendence. African priestesses shared the vision that life is sacred, plants are sacred, animals are sacred. Jain leaders called for reverence of all forms of life. Jewish theologian Dr. Susanna Herschel noted, "Too many religious leaders present God as remote and transcendent." Acharya Sushil Kumar led a meditation. Go deep and deeper. Feel oneness with all living beings. It was a virtual assumption in Rio. God is everywhere. Life is sacred. This will seem a normal insight to our readers, and on an individual level it is, but coming from every corner of Rio it took on the imperial visage of an earthwide revelation. The gospel according to everyone, the new spiritual consensus, no one really commented on it. It was one of those things too obvious to speak of, like the air. It was everywhere, its invisible presence firing the furnaces of confabulation unnoticed. Chapter 29, Spirit of the Guru. When hundreds of thousands of Sri Lankans were driven from their homeland by civil war in the 1980s and 90s, Gurudeva reached out to assist and guide their lives in new nations. As they had fallen at Yoga Swami's feet during earlier ethnic crises, Sri Lankan Tamils shared their woes with Gurudeva. It was a difficult work, listening to thousands of tragic stories, answering again and again the question, how could God allow such things to happen? Throughout it all, Gurudeva never avoided a call, never failed to give all the time necessary to a family in need, whether they had lost their son, watched their home being burned to the ground, or been compelled to flee their homeland and begin a new life in a strange place. Their calls to Gurudeva were a lifeline, and he knew it. The calls, continuing for 2 decades, came from India, Canada, America, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland, Africa, Australia, New Zealand, England, and France. The massive racial riots and ensuing civil war between the Tamil Hindus and the Sinhalese Buddhists in Sri Lanka ultimately caused an exodus of 700,000 Tamils. By divine grace, Gurudeva had traveled throughout the Hindu areas of Sri Lanka in 1983, only months before the killings began. In fact, he was in Anuradhapura when a bomb went off at Elephant Pass, the narrow causeway between the Jaffna Peninsula and the Sri Lankan mainland. He and the monks were supposed to leave for Jaffna that morning, but Gurudeva kept delaying the departure. They finally left about noon, arriving at the bomb site later in the day to encounter intense scrutiny by the Sinhalese army. Had they left on time, they may have been in the area when the blast occurred, and if the bomb had actually hit its target, no one was hurt by it. The riots which occurred a few months later could have started then and there. His message, given in dozens of temples, would fortify Sri Lanka's Hindus in the trying times ahead. Stand strong for Hinduism. Fear neither death nor those who live in fear. In 1985, following some particularly horrific happenings in and around Jaffna, Gurudeva gathered his monks together to create the Sri Lanka Refugee Relief Fund, raising critical financial support from Tamils in the West to help the homeless victims of war. He spent months on this project. As funds began flooding in, he watched as each transfer was made to assure it would actually go to the needy. His initiative inspired others to collect donations and send financial aid to the island nation. Soon after the conflict started, Gurudeva closed his ashram and school in Alavedi. A decade and a half later, he remarked, "Learning of the imminent conflict by listening to the elders, we closed all our activities in Sri Lanka and centered our work outside of the United States in the country of Mauritius. Then we found out from the elders that the place Sri Lankans were wanting to reincarnate was Mauritius. So the Sri Lankans are reincarnating in Mauritius." They are probably 15 to 18 years of age now. I sent 2 Swamis to Mauritius to conduct youth camps. Our missionaries there are family men and women, and every member of the organization is connected to a missionary family. Everybody watches after everyone else. The Tamils who began settling in the West appreciated Gurudeva's commanding presence, traditional ways, and clear guidance. Rather than lamenting their losses, he showed them their opportunities, enjoining them to settle down and become contributing members of their new countries. His simple words to many were, "Unpack your bags." Most had not committed to their new country and were living as if waiting to catch a flight home to Sri Lanka. He gave insights into integration, citizenship, public relations, and more, urging each group to start a temple, saying that the culture and religion comes from the worship and they need temples close by to preserve their heritage and pass it on to their children. He unstintingly gave them his personal cell phone number, knowing that calls would come any time, day or night. In 1995, with 2 monks at his side, Gurudeva undertook a 21-day European tour covering Germany, Denmark, Switzerland, Austria, and the UK. He visited all of the Tamil Hindu communities in those countries, had a street parade of 11,000 in Ham, brought converts into Hinduism, revisited Ascona, where Shum came through in 1968, and uplifted the thousands of Tamil refugees in these nations. Everywhere he encouraged them to pray for peace by chanting Om, and sending energy to loved ones still in Sri Lanka. He repeated the message he had given since 1983 and taught them ways to endear themselves to the local community. Your karmas brought you to this country, and you have more opportunities here than if you went to the University of Colombo. Educate your children, learn the local language, and settle down. When permanent peace comes to Sri Lanka, then you can go back. I think we all appreciate what the governments have done. There are many ways we can pay back. One way is to smile at everybody you meet. You smile, and then they smile, and pretty soon the whole country is smiling, just because you smiled. To be happy yourself, you have to make someone else happy. Mrs. Povanisam Viragathiyar shared, he visited a boys' refugee house in Berlin, talked with the officials, and saw to the boys' material needs. He then met with a group of mothers and told us that what was lacking in these boys' lives was a mother's love. He encouraged us to invite the boys and other refugees to our home for meals and make them feel part of our family. Most of us are still doing this today. Many tell of the special magic held by Gurudeva's business cards and photos, which he gave out by the hundreds of thousands during his travels. Some reported easily passing through Sri Lankan military checkpoints after showing Gurudeva's picture. M. Ilangovan of Italy related, "In 1990, when I was 14, I left Sri Lanka in a fishing boat to India. The only picture I had in my wallet was Gurudeva's. That picture helped me through difficult times. Even today I have the same picture in my wallet. Gurudeva has always been with me, helping and guiding me. Gurudeva showed up for the Tamil people of Sri Lanka in even deeper mystical ways, including simply being there for them on the astral plane as many passed away during the hostilities. When his monastics at his Kauai Monastery noticed him taking naps during the morning hours, they asked him if he was feeling all right. He assured them that he was fine. He was spending this seemingly idle time quite actively in the inner worlds, blessing souls who had recently died in Sri Lanka, placing the mark of vibhuti on their foreheads as they came to him in long lines. He would visit his shishyas in far-off places on the astral plane, working with their lives and karmas, providing solace, guidance, protection. Thiru Satkunendran of Toronto, Canada, recalled, Gurudeva was not only our spiritual guide, but also a highly respected mentor for both the young and old suffering from culture shock. Every occasion that I met Gurudeva, he was keen to know of progress made towards peace in Sri Lanka. He was always prepared to offer his services as mediator. Such is the love of this great guru towards the island and people where he found his Satguru, Yoga Swami. We are certain that he is working for peace even now from the inner world. Gurudeva explained some of the challenges of that time. During that time we were getting the Sri Lankan devotees settled down as best we could. It was very difficult because everyone was migrating here and there and everywhere. In Germany we had what were called container boys. They would get smuggled into Russia, and in Russia they would get put in containers and be smuggled into Germany. Many died of suffocation, but most arrived in pretty good shape. We encouraged Tamil families to take them in. The German government was extremely compassionate and kind. Build those temples. Throughout his adult life, Gurudeva recognized the need for the Hindu temple as the center of religion and culture. He was involved in the planning, building, or consecration of 37 temples on several continents. He knew that for Hindus to truly feel at home anywhere on the globe, they needed temples nearby, temples that gave devotees access to their God and the gods, and he assured one and all that the gods are actual inner plane beings, rather than just symbols as is sometimes claimed. From his own experience, he colorfully described the beings who live in the heavenly realms, what they do, and how they can be of practical assistance to devotees requesting their aid. My devotees wisely settle in areas where Ganesha, Murugan, or Shiva temples exist for their frequent pilgrimage, worship, and spiritual security. None should live farther than a day's journey from such sacred sanctuaries. It is in the Hindu temple that the three worlds meet and devotees invoke the gods of our religion. The temple is built as a palace in which the gods reside. It is the visible home of the gods, a sacred place unlike every other place on the earth. The Hindu must associate himself with these gods in a very sensitive way when he approaches the temple. You can go to a Hindu temple with your mind filled up with worries. You can be in a state of jealousy and anger and leave the temple wondering what you were disturbed about, completely free from the mental burdens and feeling secure. So great are the divine psychiatrists, the gods of our religion, who live in the third world, who come from the third world to this world where our priests perform the pujas and invoke their presence over the stone image. In this he was unique, as most Swamis were not enthusiastic about temples, preferring to focus on social upliftment, philosophical teachings, and yoga. Gurudeva described his approach. In the 1980s, Hindu-Indian community elders of newly forming temple and cultural societies approached me to help them make the final leap in establishing temples in various states of our country. We accomplished this by gifting them large murtis, always of Lord Ganesha, to begin the worship. These were times of fostering and inspiring temple groups throughout North America. In case after case, within 2 years, million-dollar facilities to house the other deities were built as funding began to flow in the wake of satisfaction experienced by dadis and dadas, appas and ammas, and their coming-up generation. This brought us into a new area of Shiva service to the Hindu public. At the same time, we were encouraging getting temples started in Europe. We visited one small group that was conducting pujas in a basement. I gave $50, saying, "We're going to start a temple." 6 months later, they had rented a large warehouse and built a temple inside it, a really nice temple with a priest from Sri Lanka doing the pujas. I was invited back and was paraded around the temple with 10,000 people participating. The police had blocked off the entire area. It was quite a scene. Arumugan Sarvanapavan, one of the founders of the multi-million-dollar Murugan Temple of North America in Maryland, a few miles from America's capital, recalls his experience of Guru Deva's temple-building thrust. He wanted to build a temple in our area. Since we didn't have land or a clear idea of how to proceed, someone suggested we see Subramania Swami in Hawaii. The next week, my wife and I went to visit him in 1982. I explained the problem, and the next day he presented us with a 3-foot-tall Ganesha. He said, "You take Pilayar with you, and he will show you the way to build the temple." As instructed, they began the worship of Lord Ganesha, first in homes. The community's devotion came to the fore. Gurudeva visited several times, helped with the planning, and personally blessed the land they purchased. When Gurudeva spoke at the blessing, recalls Mrs. Guruswami, wife of the temple's first president, the children were carried away. He was able to explain our religion in a way they could understand. In 1999, Gurudeva was the honored guest at the temple's Mahakumbha Bhishekam. A newsletter from the temple expressed gratitude. With his monks, Gurudeva helped every step of the way in building the Murugan temple, from the community to the structure. As busy as he was, he made time to take phone calls from the temple devotees. He inspired the young and grew himself in many of our hearts. In 1982, he visited Chicago and met with a group interested in starting a temple. Previously, one of the trustees, Dr. N. Janakiraman, had visited Kauai. They were having a great number of problems. Janakiraman explained and couldn't agree on what to do next. They did, however, agree to do whatever Gurudeva told them to do. Gurudeva told them to start the worship of Lord Ganesha. After receiving Gurudeva's blessing, said Janakiraman, we returned home, and to our utmost surprise and ecstatic joy, Lord Ganesha had already arrived at the O'Hare Airport. Gurudeva had expedited the delivery as a surprise gift. A handful of devotees greeted the 2,000-pound statue and decided to start the worship in Mr. Rajagopalan's home. The house soon proved too small to accommodate the crowd, so they moved Ganesha to an industrial complex in 1983. Gurudeva assigned one of his local devotees, Dr. Devananda Tandaban, to work with the community and keep him in touch with the progress. Thus was born the Hindu Temple of Greater Chicago. Gurudeva was a great fundraiser for temples. He attended a few fundraising meetings as the guest of honor in Chicago and gave an inspiring discourse each time, telling those gathered to get out their checkbooks and write down a number, then add a few more zeros. When he visited one temple being renovated in Singapore, the trustees explained their fundraising strategy to sponsor each square foot of the new temple for $100. Immediately, he reached in his bag, took out a $100 bill, and bought one sponsorship. It was likely, judging from the trustees' astonished look, that he was the first visiting Swami to ever contribute to their temple fund. Then he appealed for funds to the temple congregation. During his speech, I gave $100, he said, because I need the good karma of that gift to come back to me one day, maybe in the form of $500. The same promotion was repeated to bolster temple fundraising around the world. People were impressed to see him raise money like this for others without saying a word about his own fundraising needs. He told his monks often that by strengthening others, they would become strong. By helping others build their temples, his temple would manifest. In the years that followed, many he helped in their time of need turned their generosity toward him. In a similar way, Gurudeva was directly involved in 36 other temples in the United States, Canada, Guadalupe, Denmark, England, Fiji, Germany, Mauritius, New England, Reunion, Russia, Sweden, and Sri Lanka, giving each community or temple a granite murti and guidance when needed. He helped many more with direct advice, often dealing with fundraising, zoning, community relationship building, priestly staff, debt management, and more. The Mahaganapathy Temple in Edmonton, Canada is one of many that he guided closely. In addition, he helped this temple's first priest immigrate from Sri Lanka. This was Subramania Gurukul, who had known Yogaswami as a young boy. Aran Velan, an attorney in that community, recalls, the conception of the Edmonton Temple came right from Gurudeva. It gives the temple a special power to be connected to Gurudeva in that way. He brought the whole community together. He defined the community as Tamil Hindus because in the early 70s, the Tamils were a Tamil cultural group, Christians and Hindus together. Now the community has matured into a Tamil Shaivite community, and this is all because of Gurudeva's influence. The community went so far as to make the constitution of the temple state that one has to be a Shaivite Hindu to be a member. Because of this, according to D. Shelvaraja, one of the founding members, the temple now has a very clear and strong power. People from all over Canada come to this temple and have told Shelvaraja it is the best temple in Canada and an example for them to follow. He recalls, Gurudeva told us in the beginning, you have all built temples in Sri Lanka. Now, because of the children, you have to teach them what you know. The temple is what will bring the families together and the children together. In Denmark, Gurudeva helped establish the Abhirami Amman temple. The priestess, Sri Abhirami Upasagi, is deeply psychic. While in trance, she channels the goddess to heal and bless people. In the beginning, she was criticized. In 1995, she had appealed to Gurudeva as she felt these channelings were good and caused no harm. He assured her that what she was doing was correct, and giving her a Ganesha deity put her under his psychic protection. The icon arrived on the Ganesha Chaturthi festival day in August. They commenced the worship that same day, and milk began dripping from Ganesha's eyes. A month later, the famous milk miracle happened around the world, and this tiny statue began drinking gallons and gallons of milk offered before it with a small spoon. For many days after, hundreds of Hindus and local Danes came to feed Ganesha, including national television reporters. No one could explain the phenomenon witnessed by so many. A few months later, Gurudeva sent a 3-foot-tall goddess Amman deity to that temple. With Gurudeva's support, the priestess became a respected spiritual leader. In August of 2001, after leading a travel study program through Northern Europe, Gurudeva laid the 5 traditional bricks to begin her new temple with his own hands. Now that hundreds of temples have been built all over the world, many trustees have asked, what's next? Gurudeva gave the answer, I want to see the stewardship of each temple take their leadership responsibilities seriously. The temples are built, the temples are dedicated, the deities are there, the priests are there, the congregation is there. It is up to the core elected leadership, the trustees of the temple, to actually become full-time spiritual leaders and make a difference in the lives of the parents and children and change the community into a model community. Stop bashing the priests. Gurudeva stood ready to defend the priesthood who serve in the Hindu temples around the world. Especially in the early 90s, he campaigned for fair treatment of temple priests. Not surprisingly, the priests, who had few champions for their cause, adored Gurudeva, inviting him always to their temples and called upon him from time to time. The leader of the Adishaiva priest community, Shivashri Dr. T.S. Sambamurti Shivacharyar, wrote, his support for us was great. At a time when many organizations and even governments were discouraging us, he always raised his voice on behalf of us around the world at difficult times. In one of his Hinduism Today Publishers Desk columns, Gurudeva wrote, Hindu priests known as pujaris are being bashed, physically, emotionally, and mentally by temple managers, trustees, and sometimes even the devotees. We know that this is not right. Still, no one, well, maybe a few, is objecting except the priests themselves. Their objections and efforts to provide for their own security go largely unheard, as they are looked at by management as uneducated, simple people who perform rote rituals. Priest bashing is a popular sport outside of India. Priests have their sangha and elders back home in India to stand up for them. When a priest goes into disfavor, the slightest excuses are used to hurt him, such as wrongdoing in handling money. This is a favorite and usually the first to be used. The list goes on, giving management the permission to yell at him, push him, ignore his needs, embarrass him in front of his peers, and sometimes the public. Yes, Hindu temple priest bashing is a worldwide tragedy, and those who perpetrate these acts are also bashing the Sanatana Dharma. Abusing priests is not to be taken lightly. Those who can invoke blessings from the gods can also invoke curses from Ashuric forces of this planet for their own protection when angered, embarrassed, and deeply hurt. This very thing happened in Hawaii when the Christians were converting all the followers of the powerful native kahuna priesthood. Some were angered and became some of the best black magicians, feared to this day. They now live in the Pretaloka, the astral plane close to earth, afflicting wrongdoers and helping the faithful. It did not have to happen this way, but it did. Hindu temple priests deserve the richness of their holy profession, the dignity of their office, and this should not be interfered with. They have earned the same respect that any professional in the real world enjoys. The time has now come for Hindus to change our attitudes about temple priests. This will require temple managers to adjust their thinking. It will also require the international priesthood of the Sanatana Dharma to take a firm stand against their molesters and refuse to submit themselves day in and day out to harassment or to the humiliation of janitorial work and the handling of shoes. Some work 14 hours a day and more. They are considered servants of the manager rather than the temple gods. Their final justice may not be found in man's law. It may be more mystical. They may decide to go to God's unfailing law, or, if so inclined, to the darker realms for relief. Beware, their mantras are powerful. History shows entire societies that have gone down with their priesthoods. Let's not have this happen again. While supporting legitimate priests, he criticized those who claimed social superiority by virtue of merely being born into the priestly caste. I don't understand how people claim they are Brahmins because their fathers are Brahmins. They don't know the religion and they can't do the worship. It's like someone saying, my father is a doctor, so I'm a doctor. Let me operate on you. No way. In Europe and America, he advocated proper treatment of the priests, especially that they be given decent salaries, proper working conditions, reasonable hours, and good housing. He wanted them to be represented on temple boards and be given the respect and position that priests and ministers of other faiths enjoy, akin to that of a doctor or a lawyer. It wasn't his most popular suggestion, especially to temple boards comprised of Brahmins who were doctors or engineers. As an alternative, he encouraged priests to start their own temples, which a few have done and more plan to in the future. Turning conflict into cooperation, Gurudeva preached and practiced cooperation among Hindus. He said that 3 harmful habits stand in the way: attacking leaders, tolerating detractors, and disharmony among boards and committees. It is important that you refrain from the pattern that if one person in the community comes up, cut him down, malign him, criticize him, until all heads are leveled. In modern industrial society, everyone tries to lift everyone else up. People are proud of an individual in the community who comes up, and they help the next one behind him to succeed as well. They are proud of their religious leaders too. Not so here in India, because if anyone does want to help out spiritually, they have to be quiet and conceal themselves, lest they be maligned. Nobody is standing up to defend the religion. Nobody is allowing anybody else to stand up either. This has to change, and change fast it will. Swami bashing was another sport Gurudeva would not tolerate. Its origins were easily detected. Christian missionaries on one side and communists on the other, each for their own reasons wanting to discredit the Swamis. Gurudeva later said, when Swami bashing was in vogue years ago, Swamis took it seriously. They got to know each other better, stood up for each other, and put a stop to the nonsense. Gurudeva made a point of meeting as many of the Swamis of India as possible. He stayed in contact with them too, especially through Hinduism Today, and gathered their own views on dozens of issues to formulate an all-Hindu stance and to empower spiritual leaders.